What's going on, everybody? You're tuning in to Bottom Line Sports Talk with T, serving up deeper insight on everything sports. I got a great show for you today. A college football playoff has finally been approved. In the near future, going to talk about Mark Cuban's visit to ESPN's First Take, which has ignited a lot of talk out there. I have some very strong opinions on that, and you might be surprised at how I feel. The NBA draft is tomorrow. Wimbledon is here. Lots to talk about in these upcoming days, but nothing, and I do mean nothing, is bigger than what went down yesterday. So let's talk about it. Last year on BottomLineSports.net, I called it the greatest sports spectacle that doesn't exist. Well, as of yesterday, it finally exists. After 6 months, the 11 conference commissioners and Notre Dame's athletic director finally got their proposal for a seeded 4-team playoff approved by a presidential oversight committee. It finally happened, but it should have happened sooner. And if I could steal a line from LeBron James, it's about damn time. It might not make some college football fans happy like the ones that wanted an 8-team playoff or a 16-team playoff, but it's a playoff, and I'm okay with 4 teams for now. This is the system that will be in place from 2014 to 2025, and I think during that time, the 4-team playoff will take college football to heights it's never seen. There's still some things that need to be decided, but let me lay out real quickly what they have decided on. Number 1 will play number 4, and number 2 will play number 3. Those games will be played on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. The sites of those games will rotate among the 4 current BCS bowls, Rose, Orange, Fiesta, and Sugar, and 2 more to be determined. The Cotton Bowl, I'm sure, will be one and another. The winners will advance to the championship on the first Monday in January that is 6 or more days after the last semifinal. The first championship Monday is set for January 12th, 2015. The site of the title game is going to move around the way the Super Bowl does, with cities bidding for the right to host it. And the teams will be selected by a committee similar to the way the March Madness field is set. These past 6 months, it all but became a formality that a college football playoff would be created. So instead of the anger that I had prior to that, the build-up these last 6 months have been more like foreplay for me. Now 4 will play for me and all of you. Yesterday I saw the birth of the one thing that could actually challenge the Super Bowl in my lifetime. I got visions of huge interconference matchups, which is what everyone wants to see more of. That's why chants of SEC during bowl season start up, and fans of other leagues do the same. I started thinking about all the opportunity there is now for more rivalries that transcend the ones that already exist within the same conference. I started wondering what it will actually be like to see matchups like Alabama versus Ohio State, Florida versus Oregon, Boise versus Wisconsin, LSU versus USC, Oklahoma versus Michigan. The list goes on and on. The matchups we never would have been treated to, the matchups we weren't getting enough of. People, listen, I've done more research on this topic than maybe any topic since I got into journalism about a decade ago. The Bowl Championship Series, the system that's been in place since 1998, has it done a good job? Absolutely. In fact, I hope that the BCS rankings that have determined the top 2 teams in the system are used to determine the top 4 teams that will be playing in the playoffs in the new system. However, a playoff makes sense in every conceivable way more than the BCS system does. Number 1, from a money standpoint. A playoff will bring in more revenue, a projected $200 million more. It's expected to double the TV revenue of the current BCS and Rose Bowl contracts, which bring in about $155 million every year. So we can safely say it'll at least, at the bare minimum, generate between $150 million to $200 million more annually, around that range. That's why it's easy for us to believe that college football has long been the most untapped market in the sports industry. Number 2, it doesn't diminish the regular season, especially just a 4-team playoff. You still have to play your way into the top 4 spots with a very strong regular season. Number 3, from the player's perspective, there will be a few more players with a shot at achieving their ultimate goal, a national title. There will be a few more schools with a shot at achieving their ultimate goal, a national title. There will be a few more players with a chance to showcase their abilities to pro scouts while playing on the biggest stage imaginable. And no, one extra game isn't putting the NFL's future talent significantly at risk of injury. And it'll only be 2 teams who play an extra game. Number 4, from the fans' perspective, come on, we get to watch 3 games instead of 1 where everything is on the line. Don't get me wrong, the regular season in college football is the best in all of sports. I agree with that notion. And now it's going to get even better. I never understood the few fans that didn't want a playoff. It's really this simple. Do you want one ultimately meaningful game, or do you want 3 or more? Are you on peyote? What's so hard to understand? Everyone always said the regular season was a playoff. Bullshit. No, it's not. Do I really need to define the word playoff? You lose, you're done. There's no question about it. There's no debating it. You go home. See you later. It's curtains for you. You hear me? Coins. How many times did a team lose in the regular season these last few years and people are like, oh, but if they win out the rest of their games and really play well, put up some style points, yada, 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 maybe they can still make it. And you know what? That discussion was valid because check this out. There's been 14 national championships during the BCS era, right? Now this is the BCS where the regular season is a playoff, right? Out of those 14 national championship games, 8 of those 14 games, meaning more than half the time, there is a team with at least one loss in the championship game. Not only that, only 6 of those 14 games have featured both teams who were undefeated going at it. 3 of those 14 games, there were championship games where both teams entered the game with at least one loss. Not only that, but when LSU beat Ohio State 38-24 in the national title game in 2007, in the 2007-2008 season, they won it with 2 losses. And that was the second time in 5 years that the Tigers won the national title with at least one loss. In the end, these past 14 national championships have seen 11 different teams make it there with at least one loss. Folks, that doesn't sound like a playoff to me because let's go back to that definition of a playoff and why the hell it's so exciting to begin with. If you lose, no matter how you lose, if it's by 3 or 30, pretty or not pretty, in a dome or in the rain, doesn't matter who you lose to, at whatever point in the season, regardless of style points, whatever the hell those are, sounds like something you get at Victoria's Secret or some shit. There is no secret or mystery result that comes from a loss in a true playoff game. You lose and your season is over. Now, for the most part, has the BCS done a decent job? Absolutely. Has it done a decent job of picking the 2 most qualified teams to square off for the national title? There's some controversy there, but I personally believe it's been okay at that. And has it eventually crowned the most worthy national champion every year? Again, for the most part, it's really hard to argue that it hasn't, but by chopping off just the top 2 teams at the end of every year, the BCS hasn't given us a good enough sample size to represent which teams are deserving of being named the best team of the year. Surely at the end of every season, with all the good coaches and good players across the nation, there's got to be more than 2 teams who are worthy of competing for that label at the end of the season. Now, I never had as much of a problem with the rankings as I did with the notion of let's just take the top 2 teams and have them play for it. In doing that, the regular season had varying levels of importance among many schools. It didn't mean the end-all be-all for traditional powerhouses like those in the SEC and elsewhere, but at the same token, it meant too much for any team that wasn't exactly a traditional powerhouse but still a good program, like the likes of Oregon or of Virginia Tech. One loss for them is always more costly than one loss for Alabama or LSU in the SEC, who always have the opportunity to make up for that one loss by winning out the rest of their tough schedules. And yes, the SEC does deserve that kind of treatment because it is the best conference in all of college football, but not every team has the privilege of playing in it. Not every team has the luxury of losing but still being able to say, well, that's okay, we still play 6 ranked teams the rest of the year and we should be able to climb back up the polls and have a shot. Oregon and Virginia Tech aren't joining the SEC. It just isn't going to happen. Should every other team be penalized for it? That's why the system didn't promote fair competition. Am I saying the most fair competition is, the 68 team March Madness? No, because at some point the regular season does get watered down and the postseason does get flooded with unworthy teams. But more than just 2 teams need to be given a shot at proving what they can do against the best teams in the nation, because while any SEC team will get a chance to do that in the SEC championship game, that worthy team in the Big 12, Big 10, Pac-12, etc. won't get that same awesome audition to showcase just how good they are right before the national title game is decided. So for some programs in the SEC, the regular season didn't mean as much as it did for others. For some programs that aren't traditional powerhouses but still good programs, it meant too much. For some programs like an undefeated Utah or TCU, the regular season meant nothing. They could go undefeated and it wouldn't matter. If you're a fan of the Utes or Horned Frogs, what's the point? You're not making it to the big game, so don't get your hopes up. The varying levels of importance for the regular season from conference to conference is the biggest reason why the BCS didn't give an equal opportunity to everyone, which is what sports is all about, supposedly. Let me stick to those non-traditional powers with one loss for a second. Let's say there's a highly ranked team, and it's early in the year, and they suffer a loss, but they learn a lot from that loss. Who knows? Maybe they had a key player injured for that game that they lost, but they regroup, they gel. The coach is allowed to make an impact with good coaching. The teams buy into philosophies, and by the end of that season, that team may very well be the best team in the nation, capable of beating anybody. Just because they lost back in September, that's the only reason they're number 3 or number 4 instead of being number 1 or 2. And that early season loss is the reason why they can't play for a national title? Did the New York Giants look like they were going to win the Super Bowl in the early portion of last season? It's not like other one-loss teams aren't making it in, as I proved earlier. In the end, the polls had too much power in placing a team at number 1 or number 2 when those top 2 teams are usually not perfect in their own right. What's to say a number 3 or number 4 ranked team with a chip on their shoulder can't right a wrong from early in the season and become the nation's best team? What's the regular season for? Is it meant to be a year-long investigation into who the best team always has been? Or is the regular season a chance for all teams to develop and grow to be the nation's best team? With all that said, I agree with what Virginia Tech President Charles Sturger said yesterday. He said, quote, "A 4-team playoff doesn't go too far. It goes just the right amount," end quote. And there will definitely be less controversy in this new system. The number 5 ranked team will not have the same room to complain as the number 3 team did in the BCS system. In the end, we know everything is about money. The guys profiting off the BCS had every reason in the world to believe a playoff would be an awesome alternative. They knew it would rival the Super Bowl. They knew it was the fantasy and dream of every college football fan. Come on. There's a reason why lawmakers criticize the BCS. There's a reason why a political action committee was formed whose sole purpose was to end it. The Justice Department looked into whether it broke antitrust laws. I mean, I can keep going. And it's interesting because just 4 years ago, SEC Commissioner Mike Slide, the guy who's now watched his conference win how many straight national titles? Is it 6 now? Came up with something that every one of those higher-ups called crazy. Hey guys, how about a playoff with 4 teams? I mean, after all, we're kicking all of your asses, just thought we'd throw you a bone. Now that crazy suggestion was accepted. It was put forth by all the commissioners of the top conferences, and it was agreed on by all 12 university presidents. It's not like the past 14 national champions haven't been deserving national champions, but every national champion that's crowned from here on out is going to be able to say that they got tested once, and then they got tested again a little more than a week later, and still came out on top. And that means so much in itself. The bottom line is, it's the fact that everything in college football came to such a sudden climax. There are too many teams out there for everything to come down to 2 teams and 1 game. There are too many unique conferences with unique playing styles. There are too many players who can take over a game. There's too many coaches who can put together a good game plan after having a month to do it. It's all about the journey, and for whatever reason, the journey just seemed too short. Some form of a playoff exists in every other sport, and that's because a playoff is the best system we have in sports to crown the most deserving champion. That's because a playoff forces the champion to navigate a road that goes through the best of the best at the end of the season with absolutely everything on the line. Those in support of the BCS are probably saying, well, isn't that what the BCS National Championship game offered? Yes, but there's a difference. The fact that the players, the fans, and everyone else had to wait around for their resumes to be looked at and approved before they made it to the big game, that took some of the excitement out of it. The biggest difference now is you've got to submit your resume and come in for a face-to-face interview with another team that feels like they're just as deserving. Instead of teams hoping that they get to play for it all, they get a chance to do it themselves. We didn't have enough games in college football that had the ultimate desperation that we see multiple times a year in other sports. For a sport as great as college football, 1 game like that isn't enough for us as fans, and it's not enough to crown a true national champion. Thanks for tuning in to Bottom Line Sports Talk with T. That's me, Talalo Masri. Make sure to visit the new Facebook wall for Bottom Line Sports, and you can find me on Twitter at TSunSports. Please feel free to comment. That's it for today. I'm out.